Today, Britain stands at a fork in its crossroads, and its people are asking questions. Now we've got our country back, what actually is it? Who are we, and why?
The best way to find out where Britain's heading is to look behind us into something called history, a sort of rear-view mirror for time. So that's where I'm going, back there.
It's a journey that'll take me the length and width of the country. From the White Cliffs of Dover to the Scottish Highlands of the Scottish Highlands. From old stone circles to modern stone circles. From the tranquil beauty of Roman Bath to the golden wonder of Oxford services. I'll discover how we went from ancient man to Ed Sheeran, why Elizabeth I happened, and solving the mystery of just who Winston Churchill was, and why he wound up helplessly trapped inside this banknote.
Along the way, I'll be shouting at helicopters
and looking at some of the biggest events in British history and asking people about them. In War II, why did the British build bombers to attack their own territory?
How do you mean?
Well, the Lancaster bombers. And also, walking somewhere impressive with my mouth shut, while my voice speaks anyway, like I'm talking aloud in my own head. All of it taking place in this sceptred isle we call home. So join me, Philomena Cunk, as I take you right up the history of the United Britain of Great Kingdom.
This is Cunk on Britain.
In the last episode, we saw how Britain was invaded by the Victorians, who fought and won the Industrial Revolution, but not without losing their leader, Queen Victoria, who stopped happening just as the 20th century began. Now, as well as a new century, Britain had a new monarch, King Edward, who, despite his name, wasn't a potato, but a man. Edward's coronation was a grand affair, celebrated with a song that was to become Britain's unofficial theme tune, Land of Open Glory. This melodic musical tune was written by one of the best British composers this side of Ed Sheeran, Elgar. Who was Elgar? He sounds sort of rough. Was he a caveman or something?
No, Elgar was a composer in the late 19th century.
When someone like Elgar's invented a new tune, how did they sort of convert it into orchestra mode so it's being played by instruments?
He probably, when he composed it and notated it out and had the sound in his head, he would then what's called orchestrate it. So he'd write out all the parts for all the different instruments, and then he'd hand that over to an orchestra and they would play it.
How did the instruments know what to play, though?
Because it was all written out for them. Their little part was written out for them, and all the little parts joined together.
So the instruments have people attached to them?
They do.
So what's Land of Hope and Glory all about? What's its core message?
Well, it's a patriotic song. People think it's about bashing the drum for Britain, really.
If you sang it in, like, Portuguese, would it still feel British, or would that just fucking ruin it?
Well, it wouldn't have any meaning, but you might get that it sounded like it was supposed to stir you up without knowing why or what it was about.
So it's sort of like Three Lions, isn't it, by the Lightning Seeds with Frank Skinner and David Baddiel?
It is.
But less catchy.
Sadly, no amount of patriotic music could save the new monarch from an early death. And in 1910, King Edward died and was buried beneath the soil to rule over his fellow potatoes for all eternity. Little did he know it at the time, but he'd narrowly avoided tragedy by dying, because just a few years later, in 1914, Britain suffered the first of many 20th century shocks.